Think about it. How many times have you seen someone sabotage their own success, push people away, or refuse to change, all while believing they're completely right? Maybe you've tried to warn them, reason with them, or even help them, only to watch them double down on their mistakes. But here's the real question. What if you're making some of those same mistakes without even realizing it? Stupidity isn't about lacking intelligence. It's about lacking self-awareness. The foolish don't know they are foolish, and that's what makes their mistakes so dangerous. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Today, we're uncovering 8 undeniable signs of a foolish person, not to judge others, but to hold up a mirror to ourselves. Because the only way to truly grow is to recognize where we are still blind. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which habits to break, which mindsets to challenge, and most importantly, how to stop getting in your own way. Are you ready? Let's begin. 1. Lack of self-discipline. A foolish person is not simply someone who lacks knowledge, but someone who lacks the discipline to act on what they know. Have you ever caught yourself making promises to change, only to find that weeks, months, even years go by and nothing has actually happened? You tell yourself that tomorrow is the day, next week is the time, next month is when you'll start. But tomorrow comes, and nothing changes. The cycle repeats itself endlessly, as if some future version of yourself will magically become more disciplined than you are today. There was a man named Daniel who swore every year that this would be the year he would take control of his life. He promised to get in shape, to finally build his own business, to wake up earlier, to stop wasting time. And every January, he started strong. For the first few days, he was motivated. He went to the gym, read books on success, planned out his schedule, and told everyone around him that he was finally serious about changing his life. But then, as the days passed, his old habits began to creep back in. One skipped workout turned into 2. One late night of scrolling on his phone turned into a week of staying up too late. The excuses piled up. Too tired, too busy, too unmotivated. By February, Daniel was back where he started, telling himself that maybe next year would be different. He did this for 6 years, and if nothing changed, he would do it for 60 more. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You must build up your life action by action and be satisfied if each one achieves its goal." The Stoics understood that self-discipline is not something you wake up with one day. It is built piece by piece in the small choices you make every single day. The difference between a wise person and a fool is not intelligence, but action. A fool waits for motivation, but a wise person acts despite how they feel. A fool lets their emotions dictate their actions, while a wise person does what needs to be done, whether they feel like it or not. The foolish convince themselves that they will start tomorrow. The wise understand that tomorrow is just an illusion. Only action today matters. So how do you break free from this cycle? The answer is not to wait for the perfect moment, because it will never come. You must commit to small daily actions that reinforce discipline as a habit. The first step is to lower the barrier to action. If you want to get in shape, don't promise yourself that you'll spend an hour in the gym every day. Start with 5 push-ups. If you want to read more, don't try to finish a whole book in one sitting. Start with a single page. The goal is to create consistency, not intensity. The second step is to shift your identity. Instead of telling yourself, "I should work out," start saying, "I am someone who exercises." Instead of thinking, "I need to read more," remind yourself, "I am a reader." When discipline becomes a part of who you are, you no longer need motivation. You simply act in alignment with your identity. The third step is to remove emotional excuses. When your mind says, "I'm tired," you must answer, "Do it anyway." When you don't feel like working, remind yourself that feelings don't dictate action. Choices do. The truth is, no one is coming to save you. No mentor, no motivational video, no lucky break will suddenly make you disciplined. It is something only you can develop through action, repetition, and commitment. Right now, you have a choice. You can continue making empty promises to yourself, or you can take control. What is one action you will take today to build discipline? Leave it in the comments, make it real, then go do it. Because until you master discipline, you will never master life. 2. A closed mind. A closed mind is one of the greatest barriers to wisdom. Have you ever met someone who, no matter what you say, immediately dismisses it with, "I already know that"? It doesn't matter how logical or helpful the advice is, they reject it outright. But here's the real question. Have you ever done the same thing? Many people believe that intelligence comes from knowing everything, but the truth is, the most intelligent people never assume they know it all. They listen, they question, they challenge their own beliefs. A closed mind is not a sign of confidence, it's a sign of fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of admitting ignorance, fear of change. And that fear is what keeps a foolish person stuck in the same patterns, making the same mistakes, never growing. Take Mark, for example. Mark was a senior manager at a company that had been successful for years. He had built his career on traditional methods and believed his way was the best way. When younger employees suggested new strategies, new software, and new ways of improving efficiency, Mark refused to listen. "We've always done it this way and it's worked fine," he would say. When numbers started to decline and other companies adapted to the changing market, Mark still resisted. He blamed external factors, competition, the economy, even his employees, but never once considered that he might be the problem. His unwillingness to change didn't just hurt him, it dragged his entire team down with him. By the time he finally realized his mistake, it was too late. The company had already lost its competitive edge, and Mark was replaced by someone who was willing to learn. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." The Stoics understood that wisdom begins where certainty ends. The moment you believe you know everything, you shut the door to growth. The wisest people don't ask, "Am I right?" They ask, "What can I learn from this?" The foolish person always seeks to be correct. The wise person seeks to be better. A closed mind is often disguised as confidence, but in reality it is a defense mechanism. People who refuse to listen or learn are not strong. They are fragile. They fear that if they admit they don't know something, it will make them look weak. But the opposite is true. Real strength comes from humility, from the willingness to challenge your own beliefs and see things from a different perspective. A wise person doesn't need to be right all the time because they understand that learning is more valuable than being correct. So how do you break free from a closed mind? The first step is simple but powerful. Pause before rejecting something new. When you hear an idea that challenges your beliefs, instead of instantly dismissing it, take a moment to ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? The second step is to practice active listening. Instead of formulating your response while someone else is talking, focus entirely on understanding their point of view. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. The third step is to embrace discomfort. Growth never happens in comfort zones. If you only listen to opinions that validate your existing beliefs, you are not learning. You are just reinforcing your own ignorance. Right now, you have a choice. You can continue believing that you already know everything you need to know, or you can take the path of wisdom and choose to stay open to new ideas. The next time you feel the urge to say, "I already know that," Stop and ask yourself instead, what can I learn from this? That one small shift in mindset could be the difference between staying stuck and truly growing. So do you want to be right, or do you want to be wise? 3. Fear of change. Fear of change is one of the greatest traps of a foolish mind. Have you ever turned down an opportunity, not because it wasn't good for you, but because stepping into the unknown felt too uncomfortable? Maybe it was a new job, a chance to move to a different city, or an opportunity to improve yourself. You knew deep down it could lead to something better, but instead, you stayed where you were, safe, familiar, stuck. The truth is, the world never stops moving. Everything changes. Technology, careers, relationships, even the way we see ourselves. And yet, some people remain frozen, clinging to what they know, resisting change as if staying the same will somehow keep them safe. But does it? Or does it just keep them from growing? History gives us countless examples of what happens to those who fear change. Take Blockbuster, once the undisputed giant of the movie rental industry. For decades, they dominated the market with thousands of stores across the world. But when a small company called Netflix proposed an online rental model, Blockbuster laughed at the idea. They believed people would always prefer going to physical stores. They ignored the signs, dismissed the future, and refused to adapt. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. Netflix had revolutionized the industry, and Blockbuster, it became nothing more than a relic of the past. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." The Stoics understood that resisting change is like trying to stop the ocean's waves with your hands. It is pointless. The wise do not fear change. They embrace it, because they know that to resist change is to resist life itself. A foolish person clings to the past, afraid to let go of what is familiar, even when it no longer serves them. They convince themselves that staying the same is safer than evolving. But the truth is, stagnation is the most dangerous place to be. Just like Blockbuster, those who refuse to change eventually get left behind, not just in business, but in every aspect of life. The person who refuses to learn new skills soon becomes unemployable. The person who refuses to grow in a relationship finds themselves alone. The person who refuses to evolve remains trapped in old patterns, watching life move forward without them. Change is not the enemy, fear is. And fear whispers lies, telling you that you're not ready, that it's too risky, that it's better to stay where you are. But ask yourself, how many opportunities have you already missed because you listened to that voice? How many times have you looked back and thought, if only I had taken that chance? The solution is not to eliminate fear, but to act despite it. The next time you feel resistance to change, stop and ask yourself, am I afraid because this is truly bad for me, or because it's unfamiliar? Growth always feels uncomfortable at first. That's how you know it's working. Set a challenge for yourself each week, something small but uncomfortable. Say yes to an opportunity you'd normally avoid. Try something new, even if it scares you, because if you don't change, you don't just stay the same, you fall behind. 4. Talking more than listening. Have you ever spoken to someone who only seems to care about one thing? Themselves. No matter what you say, they find a way to turn the conversation back to them. They barely listen, interrupt constantly, and seem more interested in proving their own intelligence than in actually understanding anything new. It's frustrating, isn't it? But here's a harder question. Have you ever been that person? Many people believe that talking more makes them appear smarter, but the reality is the opposite. The wisest people speak less and listen more. The foolish, however, love the sound of their own voice, mistaking constant talking for intelligence. They think they're making an impression, but in reality, they're exposing their ignorance. A person who talks without listening learns nothing, and a person who learns nothing never grows. Let me tell you about Jacob. He was a well-educated man with strong opinions, the type of person who always had something to say. Whether it was at dinner parties, meetings, or casual conversations, Jacob made sure he was the center of attention. One evening at a friend's wedding, he found himself seated next to an elderly gentleman named Mr. Grant. The man was quiet, observant, and spoke only when spoken to. When Jacob learned that Mr. Grant had worked in finance, he began explaining his own theories on investment strategies, cryptocurrency, and market trends, barely giving the older man a chance to speak. Mr. Grant simply nodded and smiled, listening patiently as Jacob went on for nearly an hour. At the end of the conversation, as the wedding was wrapping up, Jacob finally asked, "So, what did you do in finance?" Mr. Grant chuckled and replied, "Oh, I was the former CEO of one of the world's largest investment firms, but I enjoyed listening to your insights." Jacob felt his stomach drop. He had just spent an entire evening lecturing a man who could have taught him more in 10 minutes than he had learned in years. But because he never paused to listen, he missed the opportunity entirely. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." The Stoics understood that wisdom is not found in speaking, but in absorbing the knowledge around you. A fool listens only to respond. A wise person listens to understand. The fool interrupts because they believe their words are more important. The wise person remains silent, knowing that true learning comes from hearing different perspectives. Talking without listening is a sign of insecurity. People who do it often feel the need to prove themselves. They fear that if they are silent, they will appear unimportant. But real confidence does not need to be constantly announced. The strongest minds do not seek to dominate a conversation, they seek to gain wisdom from it. So how do you break the habit of talking more than listening? First, pause before speaking. The next time someone is talking, resist the urge to jump in. Instead of preparing your response while they are still speaking, focus entirely on their words. Ask yourself, am I truly listening or just waiting for my turn to speak? Second, when you do respond, start by summarizing what the other person said. This forces you to actually process their words rather than just waiting to talk. Third, if you feel the urge to interrupt, remind yourself that silence is powerful. There is more strength in understanding than in dominating a conversation. Right now, you have a choice. You can continue believing that talking makes you look smarter, or you can develop the rare skill of true listening. The next time you find yourself about to interrupt, stop and ask yourself, have I really listened? Have I really understood? Because the person who listens the most learns the most, and the person who learns the most grows the most. So do you want to be heard, or do you want to understand? 5. Arrogance over humility. Have you ever met someone who refuses to admit they're wrong, even when the truth is staring them in the face? No matter how much evidence you present, they double down, dismiss logic, and insist that they are right. It's frustrating, isn't it? But before you judge them, ask yourself, when was the last time you admitted you were wrong? Arrogance is the ultimate enemy of wisdom. It traps people inside their own ignorance, convincing them that they already know everything they need to know. A person who cannot admit mistakes cannot grow. A person who refuses to learn from others will never improve. And yet, arrogance often disguises itself as strength. The arrogant believe they are always right. They see humility as weakness, not realizing that humility is actually the foundation of intelligence. Let me tell you a story about Dr. Samuel Langley. In the late 19th century, Langley was one of the most respected scientists in America. He was given massive government funding to achieve one goal: create the world's first flying machine. He had everything he needed: the best engineers, unlimited resources, and full public support. Langley was so confident in his own brilliance that he ignored warnings from his team about potential design flaws. In 1903, with the press gathered and the world watching, he launched his prototype. The aircraft lifted a few feet off the ground and then crashed straight into the river. But instead of analyzing what went wrong, Langley blamed the media, his critics, and even bad luck. He refused to accept that his design was flawed. A few months later, two unknown bicycle mechanics named Wilbur and Orville Wright, who had a fraction of his resources, built and successfully flew the first airplane in history. Langley had every opportunity to succeed, but his arrogance cost him everything. His refusal to admit mistakes made him blind to improvement. Meanwhile, the Wright brothers, despite failing many times, had the humility to learn from every mistake, adjust their approach, and ultimately change the course of history. Seneca once said, "A wise man is humble enough to admit his mistakes. A fool never does." The Stoics understood that the path to wisdom is paved with humility. The moment you refuse to acknowledge your mistakes, you stop growing. A fool thinks admitting fault is a step backward. A wise person knows it is the only way forward. Why is arrogance so dangerous? Because it creates a false sense of superiority. Arrogant people don't question themselves. They reject feedback. They surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear. Over time, they build an illusion where they are always right, and anyone who challenges them is wrong. But reality doesn't work that way. The world rewards those who adapt, who learn, who listen. Those who refuse to do so eventually fall behind. The truth is, admitting you are wrong is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of intelligence. It means you value truth over ego. It means you prioritize learning over protecting your pride. And most importantly, it means you are growing instead of staying stuck. So how do you break free from arrogance? Start with a simple question: where have I been wrong? This question alone can transform your mindset. The next time you make a mistake, don't justify it. Don't ignore it. Own it. Say the words, "I was wrong." You will be surprised at how much respect you gain from others when you have the courage to admit your faults. Second, surround yourself with people who challenge you, not just those who agree with you. The best leaders, the wisest minds, and the most successful people actively seek out different perspectives. They welcome criticism because they know it makes them better. Right now, you have a choice. You can continue defending your mistakes, refusing to learn, and convincing yourself you already know everything. Or you can take the path of wisdom, embrace humility, and start growing. The next time you feel the need to prove you're right, stop and ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? Because the ones who dare to ask that question are the ones who truly become wise. 6. Constant blaming. Have you ever met someone who never takes responsibility for their failures? No matter what goes wrong, it's always someone else's fault. Their boss, the economy, their upbringing, or even pure bad luck. They convince themselves that they are victims, that the world is against them, and that nothing is ever within their control. But here's the truth: the more you blame, the weaker you become. Let me tell you the story of Daniel, a once promising entrepreneur. He started his own business with grand ambitions, but when the first few months were slow, he blamed the market for being too tough. When his employees left, he blamed them for being disloyal. When investors pulled out, he called them short-sighted. Every time something went wrong, it was never his fault. He convinced himself that he was surrounded by fools, that the system was rigged against him, that he was just unlucky. But as the months passed, his company collapsed. He had no income, no future, and no one left to blame. Desperate, he reached out to an old mentor for help. The mentor listened patiently and then said something that changed Daniel's life forever. You lost your business the moment you started blaming others instead of fixing your own mistakes. At that moment, Daniel realized the truth. His failure wasn't caused by the economy, his employees, or bad luck. It was caused by him. By refusing to take responsibility, he had never improved, never adapted, never learned. His arrogance had cost him everything. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Stoicism teaches us that the moment you blame external forces for your problems, you surrender control over your life. When you blame, you become a prisoner of circumstances. When you take responsibility, you take control. Why do foolish people always blame others? Because it's easy, it's comforting. It allows them to avoid discomfort, to avoid self-reflection, to avoid growth. But the price of this protection is stagnation. People who constantly blame never improve. They never learn from their mistakes. They never get better. A wise person, on the other hand, asks, "What could I have done differently?" They don't waste time blaming the boss, the market, or fate. They focus on what they can control. If they lose a job, they improve their skills. If a relationship fails, they reflect on their own role in it. If a project goes wrong, they analyze what they could have done better. They don't dwell on the past, they take action. So how do you break free from the cycle of blaming? The next time you catch yourself saying, "This is their fault," stop and ask, "What can I do to change this?" Instead of wasting time looking for excuses, look for solutions. Own your mistakes, and you'll gain something far more valuable than self-pity. You'll gain power. Right now, you have a choice. You can continue blaming the world, or you can take responsibility and take control. The moment you stop seeing yourself as a victim is the moment you become the master of your own life. The question is, are you ready? 7. Lack of emotional control. Have you ever reacted in anger only to regret it later? Maybe you snapped at a friend, yelled at a coworker, or sent a message you wish you could take back. At that moment, your emotions felt justified, like fire raging inside you, demanding to be released. But once the storm settled, you saw the damage you had caused. Words cannot be unsaid, actions cannot be undone, and relationships cannot always be repaired. Lack of emotional control is one of the clearest signs of foolishness. A person ruled by their emotions is like a ship without a captain, tossed around by every wave of anger, frustration, or impatience. They react impulsively, make rash decisions, and hurt those around them, including themselves. Let me tell you the story of Jonathan, a successful project manager at a major company. He was brilliant at his job, but had one fatal flaw: his temper. Every time something went wrong, he exploded. He berated his team in meetings, slammed doors, and sent aggressive emails without thinking. His colleagues feared him, and his bosses tolerated him, until one day his anger went too far. During a critical client meeting, a minor technical issue disrupted his presentation. Instead of handling it calmly, Jonathan lost control. He raised his voice, blamed his team, and humiliated a junior employee in front of everyone. The client was shocked. The CEO was embarrassed, and within 24 hours, Jonathan was fired. As he packed his desk, the weight of his actions hit him. His intelligence, his experience, his skills, none of it mattered. His inability to control his emotions had destroyed his career. He had let a single moment of anger erase years of hard work. Seneca once said, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." The Stoics understood that emotions, especially anger, are like wild horses. If we do not control them, they will control us. Why do foolish people let their emotions dictate their actions? Because it feels powerful. Anger makes them feel strong, in control, dominant. But this is an illusion. True strength is not in the explosion, but in the restraint. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to respond rather than react, is the mark of true wisdom. A wise person does not allow a fleeting emotion to dictate their long-term fate. They recognize that anger is temporary, but consequences are permanent. They pause, reflect, and choose their words carefully. They understand that emotions are like waves. They rise, peak, and eventually fade. The foolish person, however, rides every wave without thinking, crashing into disaster time and time again. So how do you master your emotions? Start with a simple rule. Pause. The next time you feel anger rising, stop for 10 seconds before responding. Take a deep breath, count to 10, and ask yourself, will this matter a year from now? More often than not, the answer is no. When you give yourself that small moment of reflection, you regain control. Second, practice detachment. Imagine your emotions as an external force, separate from you. Instead of saying, "I am angry," say, "I notice that I am feeling anger." This shift in language reminds you that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. Finally, remember that anger is weakness disguised as strength. The truly powerful person is not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who remains silent and composed while others lose their control. Master your emotions, or they will master you. Right now, you have a choice. You can let your emotions rule your life, or you can take control. You can be the person who reacts impulsively or the person who responds wisely. The next time anger rises within you, remember, the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove it. 8. Lack of empathy. Whenever you're about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question. What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize? Marcus Aurelius. Imagine you're at a family gathering. The room is filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses and warm conversations. But suddenly, an argument erupts. Your younger cousin, Alex, makes a thoughtless remark about something you deeply care about. It's frustrating, even insulting. Your first instinct is to snap back, to put him in his place, to prove him wrong. But something stops you. Instead of reacting with anger, you take a breath. You remember a time, not too long ago, when you also spoke without thinking, when you too misunderstood something because you simply hadn't learned better yet. And in that moment, instead of attacking Alex, you choose wisdom. You turn to him and say, "That's an interesting perspective, Alex. But have you ever thought about it this way?" He pauses, caught off guard, not by hostility, but by the fact that you didn't shut him down. Instead of escalating the situation, you've opened a door, an opportunity for him to see things differently without feeling attacked. This is what lack of empathy blinds people to. The foolish person reacts emotionally, believing that their immediate response is justified. But the wise person, the one who understands human nature, sees beyond the moment. They recognize that most conflicts don't come from malice, but from ignorance, misunderstanding, or emotional pain. Think about it. How many times have you regretted reacting harshly? How many relationships could have been saved? How many arguments avoided if you had taken a moment to understand before responding? Seneca once said, "A wise man does not seek to defeat his opponent, but to win him over." That is the power of empathy, not just to understand, but to navigate difficult situations with intelligence. A foolish person confuses reacting with strength. They think that raising their voice, proving their point, or making someone feel small is a victory. But a wise person knows that real power lies in control, in the ability to read a situation and choose the best response, not the most emotionally satisfying one. If you want to be truly wise, practice this. When someone says something that offends or upsets you, resist the urge to react instantly. Instead, ask yourself, what is really happening here? Is this person acting out of ignorance, stress, or insecurity? How can I respond in a way that leads to growth instead of division? Most people never develop this skill. They live their lives as emotional reactors, forever controlled by their impulses. But you don't have to be like them. Empathy isn't weakness. It's not about letting people walk all over you. It's about choosing your battles wisely, about knowing when to educate instead of attack, when to guide instead of punish. It's the difference between being someone others fear and someone they respect. So the next time you're faced with a moment of conflict, pause. Choose empathy, not because the other person deserves it, but because you are in control of yourself. And that, more than anything, is what separates the wise from the foolish. If there's one lesson Stoicism teaches us, it's this. True wisdom begins with self-awareness. The ability to recognize our own flaws is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. The foolish remain blind to their ignorance, but the wise embrace every mistake as a chance to grow. So ask yourself, after watching this video, did you recognize any of these signs in yourself? If so, good. That means you're already ahead of most people. The greatest mistake is not being foolish, it's refusing to change. Remember what Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, every flaw you acknowledge is a stepping stone to a better version of yourself. The real question is, what will you do next? Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever caught yourself falling into these traps? Have you overcome any of these foolish tendencies? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might just help someone else on their journey to wisdom. And if this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's continue exploring the lessons of Stoic philosophy together, because at the end of the day, wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about choosing to learn every single day. Until next time, stay strong, stay disciplined, and most importantly, stay wise.